Welcome back, everybody, to another Excel VBA tutorial. So today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, at least I find it a little bit interesting, and that is how can we use VBA to take, for example, some of the macros, maybe some of the macros in our personal macro workbook, and save those macros to GitHub, right? So a lot of us, we have personal macro workbooks, and it contains a lot of different macros that we have created over a long period. And I mean, at least for me, I've been in a situation before where I have actually lost some of those macros. And it was really when I started to explore GitHub that I said, well, this is an interesting concept because GitHub does give you the capability of utilizing their API to automate some of the interactions with your GitHub repos. So for example, what I can do is I can use the GitHub API to take files, for example, maybe like a README file, and push the content of that file to my GitHub repository using just the API. So that's really powerful because we can then, using that API framework, take the content that is found inside of our personal macro workbook or even just some of our VB projects and push that content to a GitHub repository. Now, we aren't going to talk about pulling, the changes from those files into a, Visual Basic project, but we will cover how do we take an existing Visual Basic project and push some of the content to GitHub. Now, this is actually kind of funny because we covered a very long time ago, how to interact with the Visual Basic Editor using VBA. So we're going to leverage that particular code and some of the code that we've used when it comes to making API requests from VBA and leverage both of those in this video to achieve the objective that we want. So just a few things before we get started. I'm sure most of you at this point, if you've been following my channel for any sort of period of time, you know that I have a GitHub repo that stores all of the content that I do in videos. So these are really the files that are kind of just one-offs. They're not necessarily a project that would expand beyond, one or two videos. This is really just, hey, here's some code that I've written in some of my videos, and then this is where I store that code, so that way all of you can have access to it. And so what we're going to be demonstrating is how we can push content to this repo. So we are actually going to push the code that will be used in this video to the specified folder in my GitHub repo. Now, the location of that folder is actually here. So if you look at VBA, and then you'll look here, I have different categories for my VBA topic. There's advanced, core, and everything like that. This would definitely warrant an advanced topic just because it does involve using an API and understanding GitHub. So more than likely, we will put it probably, I would think, in the export macros, just because that's kind of a similar topic, but it does leverage some of the same code that was found in here. In fact, if you actually look at this one, you will notice that some of this stuff can actually be leveraged in it. Actually, I don't know if this is the specific, oh no, well, it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. This one, it depends how you look at it. It uses some code that's even used for the Visual Basic Editor. You're probably going to find that this code lines up more with what you're going to be seeing in the video, but that other one also does play a pretty important role. Now, there is one thing that you have to do before you can use the code that is inside of here. And some of that is in regards to an access token. So you need an access token in order to utilize the GitHub API. And so this actually is done behind the scenes a lot of different times when you're using different applications like Visual Studio Code or even some of the web apps that integrate directly into GitHub. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to show you how to get an access token because you will need that. So if you are on GitHub, you will notice your little icon here, your little photo. what you want to do is when you click that little drop down arrow, you want to go to settings. The settings will redirect you to your main page. You want to go to your developer settings right down here near the bottom. And then from here, you're going to see different things. So there's GitHub apps, OAuth apps, and then personal access token. So if, for example, you want to actually build an entire application that does a lot of different things, you might want to go the OAuth app route. I actually have one specifically for just managing my content on GitHub. But for the instances of this video, we actually can just do a personal access token. Now you can actually see all the different access tokens that are available to you. So if you want to generate a new token, which I would recommend you do because you can't actually access any of these tokens, you want to go up here to the generate new token. And then from here, you should give your access token a name. So you can call it VBA access token. I'm going to be a little bit picky here and do VBA access token. And then you need to define the scopes of that access token. Now the scopes is going to define what you're able to do with this access token. Are you going to be able to access repos? Are you going to be able to access admin content? Or you want to be able to write or delete packages? There's a lot of different scopes that are available to you. Now, if it's really just for your personal use, I tend to just go with all scopes just because I don't necessarily know what I'm going to be using. But if this is, again, just for your personal use, I would just say do all the scopes as is. Now, the one thing you do need to make sure is you keep your access token private. You don't want other people finding it. So even though you're about to see my access token, it will be deleted after the video. So you can see here, we have a generated access token. So we're just going to copy that. And then from here, we can just put it anywhere in the workbook, or if we want, we can actually put it directly into the code. So for the time being, we are just going to leave it right here in the workbook. And then when we need it, we will grab it and then put it in our code. Ideally, there's many different places you could put this. You could put this in an environment variable. You could put this in a text file, a JSON file. I mean, there's lots of different places you could store it. Ideally, something like an access token like this, you don't want to put it somewhere where an individual could easily find it unless you plan to keep this workbook specifically to yourself or specifically to individuals that you trust. Otherwise, I would recommend that you put it in a separate location. Okay, and then from here, we actually can go into our VBA editor and start the process of writing the code. So first things first, you're gonna go to your developer tab. And then from here, you go to your Visual Basic icon. And then if you haven't already, you want to insert a new module. And so this one, if you right click in your Project Explorer, you can see insert, and then you can see module. You can just click that and it should insert the module. I already have a module set up because I knew I was going to be doing a video on it. So I'm going to go to this main one right here. Okay, and then from here, we are going to start writing the code for our little macro. So first things first, we're going to first name our macro, and then we're going to do a little bit of the admin stuff, if that's what you want to call it. So we'll say VBA scripts to GitHub, just like that. And then from here, you do need to enable a few different reference libraries. This is so that way you can leverage IntelliSense to use autocomplete and just make the general development process a lot quicker. And then additionally, if you plan to use early binding, this is also what you would want to do. So you want to go to Tools, down to References. The References Explorer pops up, and you do need to enable two specific reference libraries. So the first one is the Microsoft XML v6.0, so version 6.0. This is used for making the web request portion of our code. So this is going to be really the main component that is necessary to actually making API requests. And then also it will help us with formatting our content so it can be sent along in the proper format. Additionally, we need to make sure that we have, oh geez, that wasn't good, our Visual Basic for Applications Extensibility. So this particular object library allows us to interact directly with the Visual Basic Editor object model. So this was covered many months ago, but you can actually use VBA to interact with all the different objects that are found inside the Visual Basic for Applications editor. So very powerful. It's really neat, and it allows you to do a lot of different things. I will warn you, there's not a ton of examples out there, but I do have some content out there if you'd like to do a little bit more in-depth exploring. You want to make sure these reference objects libraries are enabled. So you want to make sure that they have a check next to them. That makes sure they're enabled. And then once they are, you can press OK. And then from here, we need to start declaring our variables. So declare our variables. These ones are going to be related specifically to our URL. The first one is going to be the username. This will be a string object. We're going to have a repo name. This will be also a string. We're going to have a file name. This will also be a string. Pretty much all of these are going to be strings. We're going to have an access token. This will also be a string. And then we're going to have a payload. This will also be a string. This is really just all used for building our URL. And then some of it is for the actual content that we're going to be sending. The next one that we are going to be declaring is related to building our request. And so this is actually going to leverage one of the reference libraries we enabled. And so this one is going to be called XML object. And then this will be a new MS XML2 and then XML HTTP 60 object. This is designed to, again, make the HTTP request to the API. So declare variables related to the HTTP request. Wow. Alrighty. And then we're now going to declare the variables that are related to our Visual Basic editor. So declare variables related to the Visual Basic editor. Alrighty. So the first one will be VBA Editor. That's going to be the name. This will be the Vbe IDE.vbe. Now, I will warn you, if you try running this, well, not necessarily this part, it's actually going to be a little bit later, but when you try to set this particular object variable to the application Visual Basic Editor, you have to make sure that you have macro security turned off, or else it won't allow you to do it. So again, we'll talk about that just very briefly when we get to that point. Okay, next one will be our VB project. This will be a VB IDE and then VB project. So this represents an individual project inside of our project explorer. So right now I have currently two. One is for my personal macro workbook, and then one is for this particular workbook where I'm writing the code. Additionally, we're going to need a VB code module. So this one will represent a VB IDE and then a code module object. So this represents an actual code, so some code that's inside this particular in our modules folder. And then next from here, we're going to have VB raw code. This will represent the actual code inside our code module, and that's just going to be a string. Okay, from here, we're going to create a reference to the Vbe Editor. Turn off macro security, or else you will not be able to run this line of code. So we'll say Vbe Editor equals application, and then VBE. So VBE, the VBE property returns the Visual Basic Editor. Okay, and then from here, we're going to create a reference to a specific project inside of my Visual Basic Editor. I want to access my personal macro workbook. And for those of you who weren't aware, from an organization perspective, when we think about the Visual Basics projects collection, so all the projects in your editor, it is the order in which they appear right here. So this is first, this is second. So grab the Visual Basic project related to my personal macro workbook. And then from here, we're going to set VB project equal to VBA Editor dot VB projects. This is a collection. I want the first item from that collection, so I pass through the index of 1. That will return the personal macro workbook project. Now from here, I need to get a specific code module. And so inside of a project, you have components, and if we want, we can get all the different components in that object. So components come in different types. You have code modules, you have user forms, and all sorts of different stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go more general. And then because we know specifically the one that we want, we know some of the attributes that we can call from it. So specifically, if I go in my modules folder, I see a general format. So this is just code that I write on the side, basically. That's just for color formatting and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm going to grab that one and ideally upload it. Okay, so then from here, let's do this. So reference a single component in our project, and then grab the code module. And so we'll say set VB code module equal to our VB project. There is a components, wait, sorry, not that one, VB components collection. And then there is an item method. Now in this case, we can use the name of our particular component that we want to access. In this case, it would just be the name of the module. In that case, it's going to be general format. So that is then basically the key to access that component in the components collection. Now for this one, it does have a code module. And so now we have reference to that code module. So basically everything inside of there. Very helpful, very useful. Okay, so now from here, we're going to grab the raw code. So grab the raw code in the code module. So we're going to set VB, or sorry, not that set. We're going to do VB raw code equals VB code mod. And then there's a lines collection. And from this one, you can specify the starting line, and then you can specify the ending line. So the starting line's pretty easy. It's just literally the first line. However, we need to do count. So how many lines after the first line do we want to go? So this one has to be a little bit dynamic, right? Because potentially you could have a certain number of lines in one module compared to another module. However, this is actually pretty easy to overcome. You take your code module, and then there is a count of lines property. So this will return the number of lines inside of that particular code module. So this has made it dynamic. Now we have everything that has been stored in our particular one. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to print that VB raw code. Now let's see what happens. So you can see all that code has now been printed to my immediate window, but the important part is it was able to grab everything. Now, something that's really important when it comes to interacting with the GitHub API is we have to make sure our content is properly encoded. More specifically, we have to take our string of code, and we have to make it base 64 encoded. This can be a little bit challenging in VBA, but I was able to find some examples online that, from what I could tell, make the process a little bit easier. So I'm going to be actually jumping away from this particular module for the time being, and we're going to jump into our next one, which is encoding our particular, encoding our particular code. So in this situation, we're going to create a new function below our subroutine. So we're going to say function, and then we're going to call this one encode base 64. And then from here, it's going to take one argument that is going to be text, and it's going to be string. And then it's going to return a string back to us. Now from here, there's a couple different things we need to do right off the bat. The first is we need to define some variables. Define our variables. In this situation, we're going to say dim array data, and then it's going to be actually just bytes. So it's going to be raw bytes. And then from here, we're going to go back to basically our little XML object library. And from here, we're going to say object XML as MSXML2, and then DOM document 60. So this represents a document object model document. There's different ones. You want to make sure you do the 61. I did the other one before. That one was causing all sorts of errors. It's probably just a version issue. Keep in mind, these particular object references, they are older. And so some objects might no longer be compatible with the system that you're on. So just be aware of that when you're working with them. And then from here, we're going to say the next one is going to represent our object node. This will be an MS-XML2, and then IXML DOM element. So it's going to represent an individual element inside of our document, basically. Then from here, we want to convert our string to a Unicode string. This is actually, again, pretty straightforward. So we're going to say array data equals string conversion. And then from here, it's going to be the string, which is just the text. And then we're going to say VB from Unicode. So this will convert it to a Unicode string for us. So this is very, very helpful. And then from here, we're going to go down and define our new documents, our new objects, basically define our DOM objects. So the first one is set the object XML equal to a new MS-XML2 DOM document 60. So we're going to create a new instance of that object, and then we're going to have object node. This will be a new, or sorry, not that one. It's going to be object XML create element, and then B64. So this is the tag name. So I'm going to have a tag in my document that is called B64. We want to define the data type. And so we're going to say object node, and then we're going to create the data type to be bin base 64. So you kind of see what we're doing here. We're being a little bit tricky and doing some workarounds, but we're basically leveraging the document object model to convert our string into the proper format that is needed. So a little bit tricky here, but it will work. Assign the node value. And then from here, it's going to be object node, and then node typed value is going to be the array of data that was sent to us. So this is now going to basically convert everything, if that's how you want to think about it. And then from here, we can return the encoded text. And so this is going to be encode base 64 equals replace. Now, there's something you actually have to do that's really important here, which is you've got to remove the new lines, or basically the carriages, because it will impact your capability to, send the request. So it's really important that you have this portion here, because basically everything will go right, but there's new line anchors in it. And so what happens is the library is not able to handle that properly. And so we have to make sure we get rid of that before we actually make the request, and then just do some memory cleanup, nothing too crazy. So we're just going to say set object node equal to nothing, and then set object XML equal to nothing. Perfect. So this will actually now do everything that we need, which is converted to a base 64 content. Now from here, just so that way you guys see the output from that function, we're going to run the function, and then we're going to output it. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to cut off that video, and then in the next one, we'll start building the components for the request. So base 64 encode the string, and then from here, it's going to be raw code encoded equals the encode base 64, and then it's going to be text equals VB raw code, just like that. And then from here, print out, and then it's going to be debug.print. Here is the encoded content. Ooh, raw code encoded. So you can see it's a bunch of stuff. It's not really fancy, but you can see it's converted it from just the raw string to a base 64 encoded string. So At this point, we basically have, I would say, a lot of the hard stuff out of the way, at least all the stuff that at least got me confused. But in our next video, we're going to continue on and we're going to be building the actual components needed to make our request. Additionally, we're going to spend some time just briefly looking over the GitHub API. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it just because I actually do plan to do a series on GitHub later in the month probably, regarding just how to use the API and how to manage certain things about it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I do want to go over just a couple key things. So we'll just briefly look over some of the documentation and explore some of it. However, if you have any questions at this point, by all means, put them down in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you in video number 2.